This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Mike.
Hey, I'm Mike. I'm a recovering alcoholic, a grateful recovering alcoholic. Thanks for asking me to speak here tonight, Sean. It's glad to be here, to be of service, and for my own good. My buddy Mickey Bush is here tonight. He's British, so I'll be talking slower. I'll be doubling back and making sure everything comes out clearly, trying to talk in big pictures. But actually, Mickey is one of my Eskimos. You know, I've been sober 23 years. About 24 and a half years ago, I met Mickey at what was Rodeo meeting, and he was all smiling back then too. I think. How many years are you sober now? 25. So you was only sober about 6 months. So basically, he was full of shit. But he talked a good game, so I listened. But I love Mickey. Mickey's a very special guy, and I had no idea how to live life. I was really lost, and I was a young guy, and I was really lost, and you know, I was like everybody. You know, I had a monkey on my back I couldn't get off. You know, and it was drugs and alcohol, and I just tried to stop and get clean and change my life and stop getting into trouble. And I met Mickey at Rodeo and a guy named Mike Lally, who I talk about a lot from the podium because he was my first sponsor and he was a great guy, and he's still around. He's on the East Coast. See, every time I mention Mike Lally, a woman gets up and leaves. It's the kind of, am I right? But I saw this meeting and I went in to Rodeo because a friend told me, you know, I said to a friend, I'm trying to clean up and I can't do it. And he said, you know, I went to AA, meet me at this meeting. It's an AA meeting. And I went there and they were talking about God, and I hated it. You know, it was God this and God that. You know, and I grew up in a Jewish family in Detroit, and I had abandoned all religion years and years ago, you know, and they were talking about God, and I thought, okay, well, there's another thing that's not going to work. This AA is not going to work for me because it's about God. And, you know, if you're new and you're starting this out and you're having a God problem, get over it, all right? Just get over it, because you're going to get over it, and this is a God-powered program, and it's tough to hear that in the beginning because for me, I attributed that to religion, and structured religion, and I attributed to either a religion that I wasn't part of, or a religion that I didn't want anything to do with. But for me, today, when I'm talking about God, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about power. Okay, I'm talking about an incredible source of power that I have tapped into through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that will allow me to do anything I want to do. An incredible power that I can get on my knees every day and say, I need help with this. And I can turn to that power as much as I can turn to the light switch here. And that's what I have come to not believe, but I've come to know that to an absolute fact today. And it's not religion. It's power. And it's the power that keeps me sober, and it's kept me sober for 23 years, and it keeps me clean, and it keeps me together, and it's kept me through a lot of bullshit for the last 23 years, things that's happened things that have happened, things good and bad. And so when I came in and they were talking about God, I left. I turned, there was a back door, and I left. And thank God this guy and Mike Lally followed me out. They followed me into the parking lot, and that's what the program is. Okay? They didn't know me. They didn't know me from Adam. They just said, for some reason that guy just left. And I don't know why they did. They followed me, and they said, where you going? And I said, this thing sucks. It's God. It's a God thing. It's religion. I was told it was different. And I don't know what I thought. It was pinball? I mean, am I right? That's what I said. I heard it. I didn't think it was God. Thanks anyway. And, you know, these guys, and you know, there's not that much of this anymore, but thank God they said, well, let's go get a cup of coffee. What are you doing? Let's go get a cup of coffee. And this guy and another guy who was a novelist or something, and the three of them, they sat with me and we had a cup of coffee, and I worked at a nightclub at the time. I worked at the Comedy Store up on Sunset Boulevard, and they followed me up to work, and they stayed with me while I went to work, and they hung out with me, and then you know, they called me. There was a meeting at Mickey's house I used to go to. And that wasn't enough. I went out. You know, I went back out because it wasn't enough. You know, I mean, what they were offering me was hard work. You know, and and I didn't want anything to do with it. You know, and they were talking about working steps, and doing inventory, and showing up. And he actually wanted me to clean up at some meeting. You know, and I just really didn't want anything to do with it, you know, and I fought this thing. You know, if you're new and you're fighting this thing, most of us fought it, you know, and I'll tell you, I would fight for it today, you know, and it is the greatest thing that's ever happened in my life. It's the greatest thing that ever happened in my life, and, you know, by the way, it's really cold tonight. You know, the brochure said sunny and warm every day when I moved to California. But it was so cold, I thought, I don't want to go out to an AA meeting and speak at an AA meeting. It's cold, you know. And that's my first thought, you know. What am I going to get out of that? You know, and you know, the great thing was I had a commitment. Sean had called me a few weeks ago, and I thought, you know, I made a commitment. I'm going to go. That's what I do. That's the life I'm leading today, you know. And it's a beautiful life, you know. It's a beautiful life. You know, and I'll circle back around to what it was like, but you know, it wasn't good. I can tell you that. But you know, I'm running uphill today. There's a lot of stuff not working out in my life right now, you know. I'm running uphill. But it's okay, you know. I'm here and I'm doing what I need to do. And I'll tell you the greatest thing that I got going for me right now, I'm living in 24-hour increments, okay? I get up in the morning, I figure out what I got to do today. I pray to God and I ask help to do it as good as I can, and then I go home and I go to bed. And that's it. I'm in this 24-hour increment. And I'll give you a tip. If you're new and you want a little tip, and you're having trouble getting through the day, go to sleep a little earlier. You know, make the day a little shorter. That's a shortcut that we don't figure out. But I can remember I would stay up till 3, 4 in the morning, and then I'd slip. And I'd go, some of these days are so goddamn hard to get through. And finally someone said to me, well, you're getting through them about 2 at a time is the problem. So if you're new and you're having trouble, go home and go to bed. You can always put the day to bed. You know, there's nothing wrong with getting into bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock and falling asleep. You know? And that was my biggest problem for so long. But today, like I say, I'm living in 24-hour increments, and a lot of that is because I'm dealing with a lot of unresolved problems. And when I get into what's going to happen in June and what's going to happen in March and I'm in trouble. But when I'm in here today, when I know that, okay, today I have a roof over my head, today my kids are going to be okay, and then I go to bed, tomorrow I deal with tomorrow. And it's only something that I learned from you. Nobody taught me that. I came in here with no operating system. I came in here with no sense. I grew up in a very crazy, dysfunctional, wild family in Detroit, and there was no spirituality, there was no God, there was no warmth. The heat was never on in the house on any level, and nobody took the time to teach me how to brush my teeth, let alone, get on my knees, let alone do anything. So the one thing that my father taught me, he was obsessed with me not doing drugs. And he had a beautiful liquor cabinet filled with it, and he said to me, don't do drugs. I got every brand of booze you could ever want right here. And he actually said to me, as long as you don't leave the house, I don't care. You can drink anything you want. I would sit home. I would watch Gilligan's Island mixing cocktails. And I was one of four, and I was the second oldest. So I was 12, 13 years old. I had a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old brother drinking rum and Coke with me. Fighting over whether it was the Brady Bunch or Gilligan's Island, And my father would come in at around midnight, and we were just all sloshed. You're still up? Yeah, we're still up. And you're not doing drugs, are you? Nope. No drugs. And for the beginning chapters, I didn't need drugs because I loved booze. I loved taking my dad's Seagram's VO and just filling my lungs, and it would go down and be warm, and just my chest. I loved that, And I was 13 years old. I had no business being fucked up at 13 years old. But I would come home from a hard day of 6th grade and have a cocktail. That's exactly what I would do. The hell with all these kids, after school sports. I got my own team at home. I got Hiram Walker brothers, But I did. I loved to get loaded right from the get-go. And then I found marijuana, and that was it, man. That was it. I started my morning with marijuana. I went to school, smoked at lunch, came home and drank, And my parents had gotten divorced when I was young, and my mother fell apart. And my father worked all day and all night. And who knows what he did at night? And I'm not complaining, I'm not complaining. I don't blame anything that's happened to me because I had a bad childhood, because I didn't have a bad childhood. As bad as that sounds, even though we're laughing, I didn't have a bad childhood. I just was on my own. Growing up in Detroit at a time when it wasn't that bad. I rode my bicycle all over hell, and no one, as a young kid, and no one ever bothered me. I wasn't, people weren't worried about young kids at that time, and so, like I say, other than having a drug and an alcohol problem, I had a really good childhood, and got raped a couple times, but who hasn't been? No, I'm kidding. But I really, and it went on, and I moved out here real young. I moved out here on my own. Right after I didn't even finish high school. I finished on a GED because someone told me you could do that. I went, really? You mean I don't have to be here? And I took a test, and I got the hell out of there, and I came out here to be a comedian, you know, because I had seen on television that there was a place called the Comedy Store, and I actually told my dad, I lied, I said, yeah, I already got a job and everything, it's all set up. And I got out here, and the Comedy Store was closed on Sunset Boulevard. It was just an empty sign, you know, and you know, it all worked out, and I found an apartment. But what I really found was a group of guys 10 to 15 years older than me that became my friends. And these guys I had what I thought were hardcore friends in Detroit, but these guys were really hardcore druggies. And, you know, I was lucky to run into them because they were so hardcore that I hit bottom by the time I was 24 years old. You know, I mean, these guys took me in 6 years and gave me 30 years of pain in 6 years. I mean, I did so many drugs and got so drunk and so messed up. And on top of it, I was an idiot, you know, because I thought I was funny, you know. And when you cross someone who thinks they're funny and a lot of drugs, you're in trouble. I remember I was standing in front of on Sunset Boulevard one night, just drunk out of my mind, and I thought it'd be funny to moon this cop coming down the road. These cops are driving down the road, and I get up on this podium, and I didn't moon them. I wanted to wink at them, you know. And I thought this was funny. And I remember it now like a jump cut because I was bent over and then I was in a car speeding down Sunset Boulevard with handcuffs and a bloody lip. And that's it. I don't remember the handcuffs going on. I don't remember the door opening. I don't remember the foot going up my ass. I don't remember any of it. I remember being in a cell in West Hollywood for indecent exposure. And I thought, I'm at the bar going, that wasn't funny to you? And the great thing about that night was that and I was so drunk, and I spent the night in jail with a transvestite, a guy dressed like a woman, and he beat me up. I was teasing him so bad, making all these snide remarks. He beat me up, and he said to me, he goes, and now you just got beat up by a guy dressed like a woman, okay? So, and I remember, and that still wasn't enough for me. That was one of 5, 6, 7 nights that they took me down and put me in a cell for just being an idiot. I wasn't a crook. I wasn't driving because, luckily, my apartment was right on Sunset Boulevard, so I walked home drunk every night. But on the way, I always found someone to mouth off to, you know. And that was it, you know. I would get so drunk that I would just either mouth off to someone, or I remember one time I sat in a Rolls Royce, thinking, hey, as long as I'm not taking it, I'm not stealing it. And these guys walked out and go, what are you doing in that car, you know? I mean, it was just like, and again, I just started yelling at them and being all mad at them for not letting me sit in their Rolls Royce. Not like I vomited. I'm sitting in your fucking Rolls Royce. Share the wealth. But it really did. I was, like I said, I was lucky because these guys were older than me, and they could do more drugs than me, and it all came crashing down fast. And the other thing about it was I was a really talented kid. I mean, I really was. When I was a kid, I was really talented. And I came out here and, I came out here with a dream, and it was happening for me. You hear these stories about people that come out here. I was a funny kid, when I kept it together. And I was the youngest kid ever on the Tonight Show, and I was on all these. I just was getting jobs. I was getting hired, and it was everything I ever dreamed of. Everything I wanted to come out here and be funny, and I wanted to be, a famous comedian. And I came out here, and it was happening, and I couldn't handle it or something, because every time I got close, I screwed it up, and every job I did, I got fired from. And I'd go on a show, and I'd get high during the day, and then I'd try to figure out I was coming down, I was too low, so I'd figure out some kind of way to pick myself back up with a line of this or a pill of that, and sure enough, I was jittery and I wasn't funny, but it was happening for me, and that was part of the problem, I was this kid from Detroit. I was out here alone, and I had maybe $100 a month rent in Sunset Boulevard, and I was making a couple $100,000 a year, and it was all going to drugs. I didn't have the gas on, I didn't have any furniture, I just, I didn't have any expenses. Like I said, I didn't drive, and I was spending, I'd get all these jobs, and I'd go, okay, well, that's X amount of Coke, And I got this guy, his name is Marty Klein, he passed away, and he was at the time the biggest agent that you could have to be a comedian. And everybody wanted him to be their agent, and he was my agent. And he was a great guy, and he became like an uncle to me, because I didn't have anyone out here, and he really was an amazing guy. And he finally called me up one day around 2 o'clock, and he said, "You're in bed, aren't you?" And I said, No. I've been up working all morning, no. And he said, no. He says, "Listen to me. I'm calling you because I'm going to do something I've never, ever done. I'm going to drop you off the client list." And he says, "Usually what I do is I just don't do anything for a client, and then they call me and they complain, and I say, well," and then they fire me. He goes, "But you're the biggest waste of talent I've ever been involved with." He says, you keep getting fired, you keep screwing up. You're really good, but you're not going to go anywhere because you're in your own way, and I'm going to fire you." And that was a big, big thing for me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he did that. And, a couple years later, I finally got sober, and about 2 years later, I went into his office, and I told him, I said, "I'm 2 years sober, and I've changed my life." And he picked up a little 24 book. It was on his desk. He said, "Is this how you did it?" And I said, yeah, how'd you know that? He said, "I had a feeling, And so obviously, he wasn't in AA, but he obviously was aware of it. But he dumped me, and he left me with, no representation. And I actually got to the point at one point where I wasn't allowed at the Comedy Store. The owner of the Comedy Store had thrown me out, and I was living on this girl's couch. And I was, just trying again and again and again to make this work and pursue this dream, and at the same time keep this drug-fueled obsession of mine going, and it just stopped working. I just, it was one night I was laying in bed, messed up, in pain, lonely, And I said, I'm going to either kill myself or kill myself. It's it's one way or the other. I'm going out the door early here, But one thing is, I'm not going to see my dream come true, and I'm not going to have a life, not like this. And I just tried on my own about 4 times. Would get 4 days sometimes, 5 days. And then there was a guy named Jesse Aragon, who was, remember Jesse?
Yeah.
He was a wonderful guy. He was a comedian. He was a Mexican kid, great comedian. And I used to smoke a lot of dope with him. And I asked him for a joint one night, and he said, I'm clean. I got off. I'm done. And I was like, how'd you do that? And he said, AA. And I said, AA, that's the folded hands shit? And he said, no. And he said, go to Rodeo Friday night. And that's how I ended up meeting this guy. Jesse was actually killed in a motorcycle crash a couple of years later. He was a wonderful kid, though. And he was the first of the comedians that I knew that got sober. And after that, there was a long, long line of them. We all started Yuckaholics together. And actually, Jesse was one of the first guys to start that. But, so I started hanging out with these guys at Mickey's house. And by the way, Mickey, just so you know, that stands for mostly insane claptrap, compounded yearly. Am I right?
You're allowed.
Yeah. We had a meeting it was every Wednesday night at your place. Tuesday night? It was Tuesday night. And it was just those early guys, just, that support just did it for me, And then I found this place over Uncle John's Pancake House, a men's stay. And I'll say something else. Here's another thing. If you're new, you got to find, if you're new, first of all, you are so lucky that you're getting sober in Los Angeles. Okay? Because I have traveled all across the country, and I think racing Illinois, I would just stay drunk. I mean, this is the greatest city in the country to get sober in, and I'll tell you why. You can find the right brand for you here. I didn't like the big speaker meetings. I didn't like Cedar Sinai. I didn't like that. Everybody liked that Sunday night Cedar Sinai meeting. I didn't like it. It felt like a bar to me. It felt like a social scene. And then I tried a bunch of other small meetings, and I found these men's stags. So if you're new, you cannot go, and you're living in Los Angeles, you can't go to 1 or 2 meetings and go, I don't like AA. Because that's not AA. That's like saying going into one grocery store and say, I don't like any of the businesses in Los Angeles. There's a lot of different brands of AA in this town, and there's women's small meetings and women's meetings, and there's co-ed meetings, and there really are. And I was lucky that I went to this brand, this Uncle John's Pancake House, and these guys, they laughed. They had a great sense of humor, and I had his meeting on Wednesday nights, and they had a great sense of humor. And that line in the book, we're not a glum lot. That was my favorite thing. I went, okay, good. We're not a glum lot. There's going to be some laughter here, And that's the real thing. If you're new, this is not a punishment. You are not chipping the rock here. This is a new life, and it's a great life. And there are days where you're going to go, oh my God, this is good. This is great. There's going to be tough days. There are tough days. But for the most part, you make friends, and you go places, and you do things, and you go, oh my God, I'm here, and I'm sober, and I'm doing this, and I'm experiencing this. For the most part, we forget. it's the same thing. I remember when I was a kid and I first started smoking cigarettes, I had to learn to like them. At first I coughed and choked and wheezed, and I really worked hard to like cigarettes. And it was the same thing with beer, you know, and the fact is, you know, being high and being fucked up, it's not natural. It's not natural. It's not our natural state. It's something we talk ourselves into that that's the best state for us. Okay? We're in pain, so we try this medication, and the medication doesn't work, and we stay at it until it finally works. And the fact of the matter is, being sober is our natural state. And for me, and it didn't take 23 years, it took a few years, but I can go to parties and I can be having a great time, and my body will release natural endorphins, and I'll just get giddy and giggly and be having a good time. And people will say, "Are you on something?" And I'll go home the next morning and I'll wake up clean and feeling great. And that is the beauty, because that is the natural state. We are, all this shit we're putting in our body trying to make ourselves feel good, we're talking it's a bill of crap. It's a bill of crap. And the longer you get away from that, the further, one day at a time, the further you get away from that, the more you realize that. And that's what started happening to me. And it was so hard, because I built not only my social life, my emotional life, my everything. Everything was built on getting up in the morning, rolling a joint, smoking a joint, making it till about 11, having a beer, you know, and you know, by 4 o'clock, just being fucked up. And it was unnatural. And you know, today, and if you're new, you just have to trust me. You know, I live clean. I have a very clean life. You know, and it has taken me a long ass time. What time did you want me to go to? Now? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But you know, just to end up, I really have an amazing life. You know, I'm one of those people that would piss you off at the meeting. You know, I have a lot of problems, but I've been married 20 years to another alcoholic that I met in the meeting. I have 2 beautiful kids. My life works. You know, it's not perfect. It works perfectly imperfect. And it's all about Alcoholics Anonymous. I go to a lot of meetings. You know, I sponsor guys. I call people. I talk to people. You know, when people call and ask me to come and be of service, I'm of service. This is an awesome meeting. I mean, awesome program and an awesome meeting. Thank you very much.